now I want to address the claim that you don't need a gun because the police will protect you. And it actually amazes me that people will make this claim. On a practical level, it's impossible to expect the police to protect any particular person. And actually, they almost never protect anybody in the sense of actually interceding in an assault of some kind. You could argue that they act as some kind of deterrent. They are out there, and it is possible that some acts of criminal assault or some crimes don't occur because there's a fear that the police are out there. I'm sure some crimes don't occur because of that. It'll be hard to say how many. But in terms of actually interceding, they almost never do. You almost never have a woman who's being raped, and while she's being raped, the cops show up and tackle the rapist or anything like that. And I mean, it's super rare. And I think I can't imagine why anybody even pretends that this is like a viable option or something that ever happens. I think part of the reason might be is it seems like every single show that's on television is a police drama, and in every single episode, at least once or twice, they rush in and stop, some crime. And okay, that's fine, it's Hollywood and it's TV, but people then get this weird belief. They don't usually say I've never heard people say yes, the police will actually stop crimes midway, but that's the implied. That's a necessary implication for saying you don't need to protect yourself because you should just put your life in the hands of the police. They can't be everywhere. Even in cities where there are police, I mean, when I lived in a city, if you drew a half-mile circle radius around my house, there were probably always, I know that there are always police because there were police stations within that distance. And yet, if you call them, you're still looking at a couple minutes at least, and perhaps a long time. And you can be killed faster than that. You can be raped. You can be robbed. And then there's the whole issue in other settings. You can't even expect them to come. If you live in a rural setting, where I live now, 10 minutes would be really fast, and some places even more than that. And sometimes you can't even call. I mean, what are you supposed to do if you don't have a phone, or if you're out jogging and you don't have a cell phone, or you don't have reception? I've been out in the middle of nowhere with no reception before and had a gun pulled on me before. What was I supposed to do? Like build a campfire and smoke signal the police? I mean, so, and then that's kind of a technical side of it. The other side is that they're not obligated to protect you. Don Cates, who's actually a civil rights attorney and at the University of Michigan, he says it very well. He says that a lot of times when they liberalize concealed carry, or it ever gun control ever comes up, the police chiefs will come out and the mayor will come out and they'll say you don't need those guns because we will protect you. But that's just what they say at the press conference. If you ever get killed or wounded, or your loved one gets killed or wounded, and the police have dropped the ball, they haven't protected you, if you go and you take them to court, you say, hey, I'm suing you, you didn't protect me, they say, hey, we're not obligated to protect you. I mean, so at the one side they say, hey, you should let us ban your guns because we'll protect you, and then when they don't protect you, all of a sudden it's not their fault. And they're not, I mean, I don't blame them. You can't expect them to be everywhere all the time. And so, and this is, I mean, even things like events that gun control people love, like mass shootings, like at Virginia Tech or Columbine. In those situations, you had a large police presence on site before those events were over. And if you look at, like, I never forget watching videos of Virginia Tech, and they show all these cops running around with M16s. Now, M16s are many times more powerful than the weapons used by the assailant. And even if he had an M16, he would have been outnumbered by police many times, and yet they completely failed to intercede. All these mass shootings, unless they're stopped by a bystander, they always end when not because the police, take down the guy, but because the perpetrator kills himself. So then the police protection didn't amount to anything in most cases. And I can understand that. If I was a cop and I had a wife and kids to feed or whatever, you could be pretty sure I would hesitate to rush into some, situation where a mass shooting's going on. And so I can appreciate that. But what I can't appreciate is to then say, hey, you shouldn't be able to protect yourself. I'll do it, but then, when the time comes, I may not do it. And there's no promise that there's no legal obligation for them to do it. They get paid the same whether they save your life or not. And they can't possibly get in trouble if they fail, so they're not incentivized to help you. Another thing, it's amazing to me that people think that you don't have the right to defend your own life. I mean, if most people today in this world are all about human rights, human dignity, but then to say you can't defend your own life, I mean, that invalidates all free speech and freedom of religion and whatever, right to happiness. All those are meaningless if you're dead. And to just deny you the tools necessary, to me, I mean, the only consistent worldview that would encompass that position is basically a tyrannical, evil one where you hate human life and you want humans to die. And it's not that bad in the United States. Most people say you should be able to defend yourself, but you still have a lot of people say, well, you can keep a gun in your home, but you shouldn't take it outside. You shouldn't carry one with you. And I'm not one to say everyone has to carry a gun. If you don't think you need one, then you don't need, then that's fine. But if you decide that you do need one, whose business is it to say, oh no, you can't do that. You don't have the right to defend yourself if you leave your house. If it came right down to it, I'd much rather keep my life than lose my house. So I don't understand how it's totally arbitrary to say your right to defend your life disappears when you leave your house. And of course, in some states it's still pretty bad because they have duty to retreat laws that say you have to run away. Sometimes it's a good idea to run away rather than fight, but you shouldn't have to worry that defending yourself is going to get you in trouble, which is essentially what duty to retreat laws boil down to. And I mean, say what you like, I don't like his style all the time, but Ted Nugent has a good video out there where he basically talks about this. And he says, forget about the Second Amendment, forget about, all that. I'm alive, I want to stay alive, this is my life. I'm going to use whatever means necessary to preserve my life. That, up to and including gun ownership, gun usage, and the bearing of guns. And for somebody to come and say, no, you honestly, your life doesn't warrant that, you don't have the right to do that. I don't know. It just boggles my mind that people can say that. And in the United States, they don't say that often. Outside the United States, they say it all the time. But, outside the United States, especially in these, European countries and in Canada as well, that we're supposed to look up to, the state is the sovereign, and the people are basically just its property. And of course, the United States government would certainly like to be that way, and they act that way as much as they can. But rhetorically, they don't. They can't, say that you exist just for the state at the state's pleasure, and but they, I mean, that's the case in like Germany. That's kind of the case in Canada. So, the police couldn't protect you even if they wanted to, and if they wanted to, they're not incentivized to really do a good job. And for those of you who are really interested in utilitarian arguments, evidence is very strong that the private ownership of guns is a bigger deterrent than are the police. John Stossel has fairly famous interviews with convicts, felons, and they say it's always, if they're in a situation where they know their potential victims are harmed, that's far more dangerous than the cops, because the cop is probably just going to arrest you and you're going to go on trial. You can be killed, no appeal, no trial. You can be killed by an armed assailant, and it could even be, you could be the biggest badass in the world. You can get killed by a 70-year-old lady, an old lady, or a little girl, or an old man, who hobbles along, or even somebody in a wheelchair or something. You can be shot dead. And given the fact that there's so much more crime in areas with high police presence, I'm specifically talking about urban centers, and so much lower crime in rural centers where there's, police protection is negligible, but gun ownership is high, I'd say that there's a pretty strong argument that actually private ownership of guns is a bigger deterrent than the police. Not one to say the police aren't a deterrent at all, but if they were a bigger deterrent, then there would be less crime in the cities, and then there'd be more crime where there aren't police, and that's actually kind of the opposite. Now, I know there are other factors, but it seems plausible to me, at least. And then they've done surveys of felons who basically confirm this. And think about like this: if you open carried, you open carry, you're not going to get mugged. I mean, they'll say, "Oh, some criminals will see your gun and they'll want to take it." It's possible that there's such a thing as a criminal like that, but the vast majority, if they realize that you are armed, they decide not to mess with you and they flee. So, I mean, when it's concealed, it doesn't deter in that overt way. But if a lot of people are concealed carry, they have to bear that in mind. So, I guess I kind of a little bit off topic there, but the police can't protect you really. You can't count on their protection at the very least, and so that argument, I don't see how it can even be advanced.